Hey guys, Miss Germany here. All right, I wanted to talk to you about this problem right here because we were talking a little bit about fractions and I wanted to clarify how to deal, oops, as my slide just changed, how to deal with fractions, okay? So what I wanted to show you is when we're dealing with fractions, and we're going to use a decision chart, but it's the very first question. Notice that it says, are there fractions or decimals to be removed? In this case, I most definitively have fractions, and it keeps changing screens. I apologize. I have fractions there. All right, so I have 2/3, I have 5/6, and I have 1/3. So if I go to yes, notice that there's two separate instructions, one for fractions and one for decimals. For fractions, it tells you to multiply by the LCM. Okay, now when we start talking about multiplying by the LCM, what we need to do is we need to make sure we remember what the LCM is, okay? So we're going to talk about what the LCM, sorry, it's a slightly different program, is. Now, hopefully you remember that LCM means that, and of course it goes away then. All right, hopefully you remember that LCM means least common multiple, okay? Least common multiple. And least common multiple, least means smallest, common means the same, multiple means they can multiply it. So what you do is you take your three denominators, in this case we have 3, and it's only your denominators you have to worry about. Only your denominators, okay? Don't need to worry about the numerators at all, just your denominators. So my denominators are 3, 6, and 3, okay, or just 3 and 6. And so what I need to know is I need to know what's the least common multiple of 3 and 6. Now, as you think about that, some of you may go high. Some of you may look at something like 30 or 18. Those are too high. A lot of times your least common multiple is actually one of the numbers that's there. And in this case it is because my least common multiple is 6. All right. I can multiply 3 by 2 and get 6. And I can multiply 6 by 1 and also get 6. So this 6 becomes my least common multiple. All right. Now, what it says there in my decision chart is it tells me to multiply by the least common multiple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 6 and I'm going to multiply it by each and every term in this equation. All right, I'm going to multiply it by each and every term in this equation. So I have 2/3 and I need to multiply it by that least common multiple of 6. Now because that's a fraction, I'm going to write the 6 as a fraction and just put it over 1. All right, just because that way I'm multiplying fraction by fraction. And then I have plus x. And I also need to multiply that by 6. Now that x is not in a fraction form, so I can just multiply it with just the 6. All right. Then I have minus 5/6, so that I need to multiply by 6. And again, it's a fraction, so I'm going to multiply it by the fraction of 6 over 1. All right. And then I have equals 1/3. And that needs to be multiplied by the 6. And again, that one's a fraction, so I'm going to multiply it by 6 over 1. Okay, so what I've just done there is I have just recreated this equation by multiplying every term, 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, by 6. Okay, so I've got 4 terms, each one of them being multiplied by 6. The reason I use the least common multiple has to do with the fact that I can cancel out my denominators this way. Now, hopefully you remember this, and if not, just keep going for the ride because we'll talk about it a lot more in class. But I have a denominator of 3 and I have a numerator over here that I'm multiplying by of 6. Well, 3 can go into 6 2 times, and so that becomes a 1 down here. Now, what I'm really multiplying in this case is I'm multiplying 2 times 2 because a 1 in the denominator doesn't matter. So when I multiply 2 times 2, I now have 4 here. Okay, now I have plus. Now 6 times x, that one's easy. That just gives me 6x. And yes, you do need to write the 6 in front of the x there. Okay, you do need to write the 6 in front of the x there. Now, then on the next one, I have a 6 in the denominator and a 6 in the numerator, so both of those cancel. Okay, and so now the only thing I'm left with there, because everything else is ones, is minus 5. And then I have my equal sign. Now my last fraction there, I have 1/3, and it's multiplying by 6. So again, my denominator of 3 goes into my 6 2 times. All right, so that my numerators now, what I have is I have a 1 times a 2. And so that one now gives me 2. So when I multiply by the least common multiple, notice that my new equation here has no fractions in it. That's why we multiply by the least common multiple, because now my fractions are gone and life is a whole lot better when I don't have fractions. All right. So now I would take and I can solve this from there. So I'm going to draw that line that I've been teaching you guys, okay? And so now I did my fractions. So now my next question says, do I need the distributive property? Well, no parentheses anywhere now, so no distributive property. Are there like terms on the same side of the equal sign? Okay, so this side has 3 terms. Hint, anything over 2 terms means you are going to have some like terms, okay? Anything over 2 terms means you're going to have like terms. So sure enough, I have a 4, but I also have a subtracted 5. Okay, the 6x, that one doesn't matter. Or it's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't have a like term because it has an x, so it's a variable term. So I do have them, so I need to combine those two. So 4 minus 5 would give me a -1, right? Oops, I'm still on a box, sorry. Let me freehand that. So it's give me a -1, and so then I just bring down my 6x. So I have 6x minus 1 equals 2. All right, so I combined my like terms, my 4 and my -5, and got -1. All right, next question says, are there variables on both sides? Well, I have a variable here, but not here. So no, there's not variables on both sides. Okay, are there constants on both sides? Well, here I have a -1, here I have a +2. So yes, they're on both sides of that equal sign, both sides of my line. So I am going to use that inverse operation. Okay, since this is subtracted, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. All right, so I add 1 to both sides. And when I do that, these are going to cancel out, which is going to leave me with just 6x over here on the left. And then 2 plus 1 is going to give me 3. Okay, so that was moving it away from the variable. I've got to move the -1 because that's on the same side with the variable. So I add it over. Now, last question. Is there a coefficient with the variable? In other words, is there a number other than 1 being multiplied by the variable? Well, in this case, yes, because it's 6x, okay? And so in that case, then I would divide to solve for the variable. Since it's multiplied, the inverse operation this time would be division, okay? So I'm going to divide by 6. And what I do on one side of the equal sign, I have to do on the other. So I divide by 6 on both sides. These 6's are going to cancel out, which leaves me with just my x. Okay, and just because I'm writing out of room, I'm right over here. So x equals 3 over 6. My answer can be a fraction, and that's okay. But I can simplify this to 3 over 6 into 1/2. All right, so I can simplify that into 1/2. So when we're dealing with fractions, we're going to identify the least common multiple, okay? Identify that least common multiple, and then we multiply every term in the equation by the least common multiple. All right, multiply every term in the equation by the least common multiple. This is what you will do to get rid of the fractions and make it an equation more like what you're used to solving. Now be aware your answer then may turn into a fraction answer, and that's okay. All right, your answer may be a fraction answer in the end, and that's okay. So hopefully this will help. Reach out if you need anything else, but hopefully this is going to help you guys. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.